Let's walk the streets of Dublin as they were in the early 20th century. Many songs have been written about this era. Let's try and imagine those songs to really put ourselves back in the shoes of those people who lived through those days. Folk songs have a special hidden power. They're connected with the people, their stories, their struggles, our history. In this video, we're going to take a look at 3 popular Irish songs which revolve around the 1916 Easter Rising. Each song gives you a unique perspective on the events. Rather than exploring the historical events on a timeline, I want to try and give you a vivid image of those events through the songs that we know and love. But before we get into the songs, let's first get a sense of what Ireland was like through the early 20th century and understand why such songs exist. In 1916, Dublin was a city of stark, violent contrasts. It was the second city of the British Empire, boasting wide Georgian boulevards and the elegant architecture of British rule. Yet, a stone's throw from the vice-regal splendour lay some of the worst slums in Europe. Housing in Dublin was seriously run down. Families of 10 or more lived in single rooms in these damp, decaying Georgian townhouses, ravaged by tuberculosis and malnutrition. The infant mortality rate was shocking, surpassing even that of Calcutta at the time. This social degradation fueled a simmering anger among the working class, led by James Larkin and James Connolly, to name a few. Simultaneously, a cultural revolution was underway. The Gaelic League was reviving the Irish language in sports, fostering a sense of separate national identity, whilst the Irish literary revival, led by W.B. Yeats and Lady Gregory, was reclaiming Irish mythology. Politically, the island was in limbo. The Irish Parliamentary Party had spent decades arguing for a home rule, and this was a limited form of self-government within the United Kingdom. A home rule bill had technically passed in 1914, but it was suspended due to the outbreak of the Great War, World War I. For many, this was a promise deferred. For the radical separatists of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, it was a betrayal and a signal that British rule would never end peacefully. It is against this backdrop of a world at war, a city in poverty, and a nation in cultural flux that the Easter Rising erupted. It was an event that would transform Ireland from a restless province of the United Kingdom into an independent republic, a transformation immortalised not just in the history books, but in the ballads that preserved the emotional truth of the revolution. The 1916 Rising was not a mass movement from the start. It was a conspiracy within a conspiracy. The Irish Volunteers was largely a parliamentary organisation formed to ensure home rule, but a secret inner circle known as the Irish Republican Brotherhood infiltrated its leadership. While the official leaders thought that they were drilling for defence, this secret council was actively planning a revolution to strike while Britain was distracted by World War I. The plan was set for Easter Sunday, but it fell apart 24 hours before it began. The official chief of staff of the Volunteers, Owen McNeill, discovered the secret plan and realised a promised shipment of German weapons had been sunk. Furious, he tried to stop the rebellion to save lives. He issued a countermanding order, which was published in the Sunday newspapers, specifically the Sunday Independent, publicly cancelling all parades and manoeuvres for the weekend. McNeill's newspaper order had a devastating effect. Instead of a national army of over 10,000 men rising up simultaneously across Ireland, confusion reigned. Most volunteers stayed home, believing that the event was cancelled. The rebel leaders in Dublin held an emergency crisis meeting and decided to delay the rising by one more day, to Easter Monday. But the damage was done. Instead of thousands, only about 1,500 men and women turned up in Dublin. At noon on Monday, April 24th, the rebellion began. The smaller force of rebels marched into Dublin city centre. They seized key buildings and most notably the General Post Office on Connolly Street. Padraig Pearse stood outside the GPO and read the proclamation of the Irish Republic to a bewildered crowd, declaring that Ireland be a sovereign state.
Oblak na hÉireann, the provisional government of the Irish Republic. To the people of Ireland, Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and the dead generations from which she draws her old traditions of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom, having organised and trained her manhood through her secret revolutionary organisation, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and through her open military organisations, the Irish Volunteers and the Irish Citizen Army. Having patiently perfected her discipline, having resolutely waited for the right moment to reveal itself, she now seizes that moment. And supported by her exiled children in America and by gallant allies in Europe, but relying in the first on her own strength, she strikes in full confidence of victory.
The British authorities were initially caught off guard, but the reaction was swift and overwhelming. They declared martial law and rushed thousands of reinforcements into the city. They used 18-pounder field guns to blast rebel positions. The ship, the Helga, sailed up the River Liffey and shelled the city centre. The shelling sparked massive fires that destroyed much of central Dublin. By the end of the week, the rebels were surrounded and outnumbered 20-1 basically, and trapped in burning buildings. On Saturday, April 29th, to prevent further civilian slaughter, Padraig Pearse ordered an unconditional surrender. The rebels were marched into captivity, initially jeered by the Dublin public, who blamed them for the destruction. However, the British military governor, General Maxwell, decided to crush the movement permanently. He set up secret military courts. Over a period of 9 days in May, 15 leaders were executed by firing squads in the Stonebreakers yard of Kilmainham Jail. Key figures who were executed included Padraig Pearse, Thomas Clarke, Tomás McDonagh, and James Connolly. James Connolly was so badly wounded he had to be tied to a chair to be shot. These executions turned the tide of public opinion. The rebels transformed from traitors causing chaos into martyrs dying for their country. This shift paved the way for the War of Independence in the next few years. In Ireland, history is often sung before it's written. There is an interesting reason for this. At its core, a lot of Irish history wasn't officially written down. Writing it down was essentially either illegal or just impossible when the Crown controls the official records. The truth has to go underground, so it migrated into the music, the folklore. A lot of ballads became an indestructible archive for the rebellions and tragedies that the state tried to wipe from memory. Folk songs preserve the perspective of the defeated until it becomes the narrative of the victors. I've picked 3 songs to give you a vivid picture of the 1916 Easter Rising from different perspectives. They are like historical documents that encapsulate specific emotional and political dimensions of the Rising. And I'm going to have links in the description down below where you can easily go and listen to the full version of each one anytime you want. The Foggy Dew is perhaps the most famous and lyrically complex of the 1916 ballads. It was written in 1919 by Canon Charles O'Neill, a parish priest from County Down. The song was first composed during the first sitting of Dáil Éireann, the revolutionary Irish Parliament, in 1919. As the roll of elected members were called, many names were answered with the phrase Fuiglas Segnagal, or locked up by the foreigners. Canon O'Neill was struck by the absence of these men, imprisoned for their role in the independence movement. The narrator assumes the role of a chronicler or a bard.
As down the glen one Easter morn to a city fair.
This establishes a tone of witnessing history. The narrator in the song is not fighting in the GPO. He is observing the armed lines of marching men with a sense of solemnity and sorrow. This distance allows the song to be reflective and analytical rather than just a battle cry. The central theme of the Foggy Dew is the conflict of loyalty facing young Irish men during World War I. At the time, John Redmond, who was the leader of the moderate nationalists, had encouraged the Irish volunteers to join the British Army, arguing that fighting for small nations like Belgium would guarantee home rule for Ireland. O'Neill's lyrics brutally dismantled this argument. Suvla refers to Suvla Bay, a landing site in the Gallipoli campaign of 1915, and Sudalbar refers to a village at the tip of the Gallipoli Peninsula. These were sites of slaughter for the 10th Division. O'Neill is arguing that the Irishmen that died there were wasted fodder for the British Empire. He contrasts their lonely graves by the waves with the glory of those who fell in Dublin fighting for their own nation. The song explicitly reframes the rising. It acknowledges the tragedy, but insists on the moral superiority of the rebel cause. It challenges the slavery of the status quo. The Foggy Dew teaches that the rising was necessary to reclaim Ireland's soul. It asserts that true courage was not found in the trenches of France fighting for the king, but in the burning ruins of Dublin fighting for the Republic. It cemented the narrative that the 1916 rebels were the legitimate inheritors of the Irish patriot tradition. Of all the versions, Sinead O'Connor and the Chieftains version for me is one of the best. I have a link in the description to that song. But let me know in the comments if you have any other favourite versions that you'd like to share. While the Foggy Dew deals with geopolitics, Grace deals with heartbreak. Written in 1985 by Frank and Sean O'Mara, it is a modern ballad that has become one of the most loved Irish songs. But how is it linked to 1916? The song tells the true story of the wedding of Joseph Plunkett and Grace Gifford. Joseph Plunkett was a signatory of the proclamation. He was 28 years old and dying of tuberculosis. During the rising, he was so weak he often had to rest on a mattress in the GPO. Yet his strategic mind helped plan the defence. Grace Gifford was a talented cartoonist and artist. She was born into a Unionist family but became a Republican. Her sister Muriel was married to Tomás McDonagh, another executed leader. The song is sung from the first-person perspective of Joseph Plunkett in his cell at Kilmainham Jail. This intimacy is its power.
Hold me in your arms and let this moment linger. They'll take me to dawn, and I will die.
By placing the listener inside the mind of the condemned man, the song strips away the politics and leaves only the human cost. It transforms Plunkett from a historical abstraction into a terrified young man saying goodbye to the love of his life. The wedding took place in the prison chapel just before midnight on May 3rd, 1916. There was no music, no flowers, and no family. Plunkett was brought in handcuffs. The cuffs were removed for the ceremony and immediately put back on. The chapel was filled with British soldiers with bayonets fixed. The couple was forbidden to speak to each other during the ceremony. They were separated immediately. Grace was allowed to return at 2 a.m. for a final visit. They had 10 minutes in his cell, which was crowded with guards. A guard stood over them with a watch. Plunkett was executed at dawn the next morning. The song softens this brutal reality, focusing on the emotional truth of their bond rather than the grim logistical details. Grace teaches us about the widows of the rising. Grace Gifford lived until 1955, never remarrying. She was a living ghost of 1916, earning a mere living as an artist. During the Irish Civil War between 1922 and 23, she was imprisoned in Kilmainham Jail, the same place her husband was executed by Free State government. She painted the Madonna and Child on the wall of her cell, an image that remains there still to this day. The song reminds us that the execution of the leaders destroyed families and left scars that lasted for decades. If you'd like to see the full story behind this song in particular, check out this video here where I go into more detail about the events and the lives of Joseph and Grace. And as for a version of the song I would recommend, it has to be Jim McCann with the Dubliners. I have a link in the description for that version, but let me know in the comments too if you have a different favourite version. The Ballad of James Connolly is a song of fury. Unlike the mournful Grace or the majestic Foggy Dew, this is a protest song, raw and combative. But how is it linked to 1916? The song focuses entirely on the execution of James Connolly on May the 12th, 1916. Connolly was a unique figure, a Scots-born Labour leader who fused socialism with Irish nationalism. He believed that national freedom was useless without economic freedom. The narrator in the song is a partisan Irish observer, filled with rage at the British administration. The tone is explicitly anti-British.
God's curse on you, England, you cruel-hearted monster. Your deeds, they would shame all the devils in hell.
This reflects the intense anger of the working class Dubliners who revered Connolly not just as a patriot, but as their champion against the slum landlords and industrial tycoons. The song utilises powerful imagery that diverges slightly from historical fact to create a stronger myth.
The right flag was hoisted, the cruel deed was
Historically, black flags were flown over British prisons to signal the completion of an execution. This image evokes the grim finality of state power. Historical accounts state Connolly was calm and dignified. When he was asked if he would pray for the soldiers about to shoot him, he said, "I will say a prayer for all brave men who do their duty." The song highlights the special status of Connolly. He was the last of the 7 signatories to be executed. The fact that he was shot while tied to a chair because he could not stand is the central image of the song, used to highlight the moral bankruptcy of General Maxwell's crackdown. The line, "The shamrock is growing on the grave of James Connolly," here it suggests that while the man was killed, his ideas of a socialist, independent Ireland are indigenous and regenerative. They cannot be killed by firing squads. When we're talking about a great version of this song, I would highly recommend listening to the Wolf Tones. I have a link in the description for that one, but let us know in the comments if you have any other favourite version that you'd like to share with everyone. The 1916 Easter Rising was a military disaster. The rebels held out for less than a week. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and initially unpopular. Yet today, they are revered as the founding fathers of the Irish state. How did this transformation even happen? While the executions provided the spark, folk music provided the oxygen. In the years following 1916, when censorship was heavy and political meetings were often banned, songs like the Foggy Dew kept the memory of the Rising alive. They functioned as an oral history, passing the narrative from generation to generation. These songs perform a vital historical function. The Foggy Dew explains why the Rising happened. Grace reminds us of the people behind the politics. And the Ballad of James Connolly preserves the anger and the socialist ideals that were often sidelined by later conservative governments. The ballad boom of the 1960s, with bands like the Wolf Tones and the Dubliners, revived these songs for a new generation, cementing the 1916 leaders as cultural icons. Sung with passion in the pubs of Dublin more than a century later, they proved that in Ireland a song can be more powerful than a statute book. In my opinion, it just goes to show that while a song might be perceived as just entertainment initially, the power that they can have when connected with historical events like this and real experiences of real people, they can shape a nation all the way down to each individual for decades or even centuries to follow. But anyway, before you go, since you made it this far, if you could click that like button, I would really appreciate it. And also check if you're subscribed as well. If you'd like to continue seeing more Irish music or Irish history videos like this now and then. But just a quick update, I was working on some videos over the last week and they're practically finished, but I'm waiting for permission to use some songs from an archive. Hopefully it comes through because I think it will elevate the videos massively. If I'm not able to do it, I will let you know, and I will resort to something like just directing you to the archive so you can listen to the music that way. But St. Patrick's Day is next month, biggest day of the year, bigger than Christmas. I have the first batch of products up on the website, so if you need a green t-shirt or something like that, go on and have a look, sure, there might be something you like. If you want a custom design, let me know and I can work on something for you. And as always, a huge shout out to our channel members. Here's your names up on screen now. Thanks a million for all your continued support. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to join them and support the channel just a little bit more than just subscribing, check out the join button down below or the links in the description for more information. But look, that's it from me. I won't keep you any longer. Thanks a million for watching. I hope you all have a great day. Slán go fóill. Cheers.